All right. We are set to go. We have about 6 or 7 people in here now, and it's just about the top of the hour. Make sure that, oops, okay, testing, there we go. Well, since those of you who are here were kind enough to come and hop on time, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today is today? Today is the 20th of September, 2016. The year is going fast. So this is our September JST webinar, and I appreciate you joining us. We've had a lot of people interested in this topic of setting boundaries in coaching, what coaches, parents, and students need to know. It's something that we teach a lot in our courses, but you can never get too much about how to manage those boundaries because they can get in the way. Here is the link to the webinar handouts, and you can get to that anytime. It will be available, so you can get it after the webinar. If you want to get it now, certainly if it's available to you to pop on that on your computer. I'll just leave this up for a minute to make sure that people who are here know that, again, there's a tiny URL to the handouts for the webinar. I'm just going to let a few more people come in so that we make sure everybody gets that webinar link. Okay. No, if the link does not work for you to be clickable because you're here, you just have to copy and paste it in. That's the only drawback to this new service that we're using. It doesn't allow us to attach, so I apologize for that. But if you can, the other option certainly is if you can't get this, just feel free to email me, and I can send those to you, Charlotte. Of course, to you, Charlotte. Hi, Charlotte. To everybody, I'm happy to do that if you're not able to get to that link. Let me type that in for anybody who might not hear me. I can send out the link. We will send out the link as a clickable link with the recording as well, with the recording after the session, if you're not able to copy it down and get that. So that's good information for me to know that the link does not copy. Okay, it worked for someone else's webinar recently, so now I'm learning. All right. So let's get started here. And next, I'm just going to close the chat for a moment and make sure everybody's good. All right. Well, once again, welcome. And this is the link to the handouts. If you don't get them now, we will send them out with the link to the the MP4 for the webinar. All right, so going to the next one, to the objectives of the webinar today, I just want to go over with you. It's a long list, but a lot of these things are interrelated. The first thing I want to do is to clarify the roles in the coaching relationship. Then I will discuss the ethics around setting boundaries in coaching, explain the benefits of setting clear expectations with students and parents. And I'm sure many of you are like, oh yeah, we definitely have to make sure that we're clear. I've learned that myself through experience, that when you're not clear, it comes back to haunt you. Explore the impact of emotions from all parties. Learn to help parents wait in the wings, so to speak. Provide insight into the connection between confidentiality and trust and honesty. And I'll share some sample conversations on boundaries. So the first piece here, the ICF Code of Ethics. The roles in the coaching relationship are really important to understand from the standpoint of what we as coaches are required to do. But it's also for those of you who might be listening to this from the viewpoint of a parent. It's important for you to know that coaches are held to a standard, that we might not be licensed, but we are, most of us are credentialed. We do follow a code of ethics. We are self-governed. We make sure in our trainings that we are following the rules. And they were set out in order to make sure that our connection to our clients or our students is effective and appropriate. So for the roles in the coaching relationship, as they define it, in order to clarify the roles in a coaching relationship, it's often necessary to distinguish between a client and a sponsor. In most cases, the client and the sponsor are the same person and are therefore jointly referred to as the client. So just to step into that, as someone who works with students, with minors, even with college students whose parents are the sponsors, we do have two totally separate individuals: the client, the student, which I'll refer to as we go through this, and the sponsor is the parent. So in this case, the roles are defined as the client or coachee is the person being coached, and the sponsor is the entity, including its representatives, meaning if a company was paying for the coaching, so this could work for adults as well. If a company is paying for it, that's the sponsor, and they're arranging for the services to be provided. But there is a set of rules that need to be established to make sure that the client's rights are upheld throughout the coaching process. So that's why it's important that we, and we'll talk about that today, is making sure that the coaching engagement agreement are clearly establishing the rights, roles, and responsibilities for client and sponsor if they're different people. And in this particular webinar, we'll be talking as if they are two different people. So the next piece, it comes from the ICF Code of Ethics, Section 4, on confidentiality and privacy. So for me, as a coach, I maintain the strictest levels of confidentiality with all client and sponsor information unless release is required by law. For me, what that means, and my recommendation to you, is I don't take detailed notes. I have basic information on my clients, on my students, and their families, whatever's necessary, what's given to me, but they're all locked up in my desk, which is then locked up in my office, which is then locked up in the building that I have my office in. For many people, it's the desk, the door to your office or office space, and then the door to your house. So the idea here is, even though coaches are not required to follow HIPAA, I recommend that you keep things as secure as possible. So at the end of the day, if there are going to be people coming in and out of your office or the space that you're using for coaching, make sure you put away all the folders or close out the applications on your phone or your computer that have all that information. It has to be confidential. And if you have someone, I have an assistant who occasionally helps me with files, and that assistant has to sign a confidentiality agreement because no one is allowed to look at my files or even see the name of anyone who I may have coached in the past or who I'm coaching now without specific permission from me and an understanding that it might be, gee, what if your neighbor happens to be on the list? That assistant cannot talk to the neighbor or even disclose that they found out anything from looking at my files and doing work. So it's really important, and that's what people trust and expect. The other part of it is having the clear agreement about how coaching information will be exchanged among the coach, client, and sponsor. So this is where it gets down to how much detail do you have permission to share as a coach? Parents, how much detail do you understand you don't have access to if your child, if the client says, no, you will not share things unless there's an emergency, you will not share with my parents. And that's part of what you want to have a clear agreement on from the first time that you meet in that intake or discovery session, so that the boundaries are clear and there's no question of who's doing what, who's saying what, and what type of information will and will not be shared. So that's critical, and it's worth spending extra time on this confidentiality and privacy issue. Even in the JST training model and coaching model, you're doing a pre-screening, which would be before the person is actually your client. I find it valuable to talk to the parents about the fact that there will be boundaries and ask them, are you willing to accept that there will be boundaries here and that you are the sponsor and not the client, and that your child, however old that child may be, we do not share information from our coaching sessions with parents unless given permission by the child, by the student. So that's really important, because some parents will say, well, if I can't be in the sessions, if I don't get a written report every day or every week, then I don't want to work with you. That's their choice, but it's not appropriate for coaching unless the student willingly, and willingly is the key, not coerced by the parents, but willingly agrees to share information. So that's an important piece to consider. So what's the benefit of setting clear expectations? There are no surprises. Because I like surprises when they're good surprises, but the surprises that come up when the clear expectations are not set can be very uncomfortable, and I'm putting that mildly. There are times when parents have not understood or heard what the expectations are. Maybe they'd hope that, well, gee, once we get started, I'll get to know the coach better. So if I want to know anything about what happened at school today, or who my daughter went out on a date with, and so on, that the coach is going to give me all that information. Absolutely not. But what happens is the parents will push and push and push and do their best to get in when they're feeling left out. And there are many reasons for that that we'll talk about. But it's important not to have those surprises. There's nothing worse than getting a long, angry email from a parent or a phone call saying, you must fill me in. I'm paying and this is what's expected. I want you to report to me. Those are the times when I will respectfully decline to do that. And if that parent, that sponsor wants to stop coaching, that's fine. So it's so much better to set those expectations up front. So that's where we design the coaching relationship in a clear, well understood manner. Everyone knows their role. It might be that part of it is that each week after the coaching session, the student, the client, would go back to the parents and say, hey, here's kind of the overview of what we talked about in coaching today, or here's how I'm doing with my coaching or with my academics, so that the parents have some information directly from the student, but it is not coming from the coach unless there's a specific reason why the coach should be sharing that information. So the other piece as well is to make sure that all parties agree. So for example, there are going to be times when parents will want a certain plan. For example, I've had parents that have asked for the ability to be a part of one or more coaching session every month. Depending on the age of the student, we'll talk about that. Okay, so what are we saying? Are we agreeing that every third week that we're all going to get together on the phone or on Skype or in person? And how is that going to be for everyone? What would be the content and the goal of that particular session? It's worked well for some families. They just show up, they come in for maybe 5 or 10 minutes of the coaching session to share what they've noticed, the positives. We always lead with positive, and then they might say, well, there's some areas that we notice still need to be worked on. I understand that you're working on that in your coaching, but just want to mention that we're concerned, for example, that some school paperwork is left on the printer at home and not taken into school on time. So, that's an issue that then you ask the student, are you okay with this? What are your thoughts on it? So we're having an agreement. We've set an agreement as to what this session is going to be about, how much time the parents are going to be in the session with us, if they have those at all. There are some students who don't want to do it, and they prefer to go and meet with their parents privately before or after the coaching session. As long as the family understands, sometimes parents don't particularly agree wholeheartedly because they're uncomfortable with letting go. But over time, I find that most parents are fine with it. They just need to understand the boundaries. And then, of course, something that really helps parents a lot is to clarify what's an emergency situation and what's at the coach's discretion. In our contracts, we say that it's at the coach's discretion to disclose or share information. If the student is in danger, doing something that would be harmful to self or others, if I notice that one of my students is having real struggles, mental health issues, something that appears to not be taken care of or is not being taken care of properly, I want to make sure that the parents or therapist or doctor, somebody knows what's happening. So that's where it's at my discretion to decide, I'm really concerned about this level of depression and your anxiety, because we're not coaching around that, but that's something that's getting in the way of you meeting your goals. We have to decide which one of us is going to pick up the phone and call for some help. So that's where we set those boundaries and make sure the students understand up front, and I'll use that as an example when we're signing the contract. So then we come to the impact of emotions on boundaries, which is a big one. There truly is a tug of war between the students and the parents. So here's some likely conversations. The parent is saying, how will I know what's happening? What if my child is not doing well? How will I find out if coaching is actually working? Parents want data. They want to know that everything's okay and that the coach is actually helping their child to succeed. And if their child is failing, they want to know that, of course. They want to know how things are going. So what we want to do in that situation is help the parents understand that sometimes we don't have those answers right away because it takes time in the coaching. And if they're willing to be patient, that either the client or the coach will report that information to the parent in a very succinct manner. One of the examples would be your child is showing up for coaching. We're having our sessions weekly. There's nothing that from my perspective, my observation that there is to be concerned about. If you have any other questions, please contact your student. And that's usually high school and college. When they're younger, sometimes we have to do some role playing and facilitating the conversation between the students and the parents. But that's parents, the biggest worry for parents is, how do I know that this is working? Like, what am I paying for? And what if things are not going well? It happens. There are times when students don't tell you the truth. There are times when adult clients don't tell us the truth. So we want to figure out how to improve that trust in us and the honesty from the students in order to facilitate more effective coaching. Then we shift over to the student. Can I trust you to keep our conversations confidential? That's important to the students. They need to know those boundaries up front because emotionally they're fearful. They're wondering, what will happen if I say something about my situation today, or where I went with my friends, or that I forgot to turn in a paper? How will the coach react? And how do you know? How do I know as a student that the coach isn't going to be reporting in regularly to the parents? And the other side of it, this question of how do I know that my mom or dad is not telling you what to make me do? Because some parents, in the best interest of their child, want to direct things. It's sort of the opposite, the antithesis of coaching, in that we're asking rather than telling. And oftentimes parents will say, well, we want our child to go to a certain college, or we want a certain GPA, or we expect certain things to happen. That's a conversation that they can have on their own. But in coaching, it's not for me as a coach, nor for any of you, to be in a position of saying, well, your parents want you to have a 3.5, so what do you need to do to get to that 3.5? No, it would be, I heard from your mom today that she's really pushing for a 3.5. What are your thoughts about that? Where's GPA in all of this? Me, Jodi, I personally do not believe that grade point average is something that is valuable to put at the forefront of coaching goals, because it's a number to shoot for rather than helping with skill building overall. If a parent asked for improved organizational skills to be used at home as well as in school, absolutely. That's something that I'd ask, are you willing to work on that? It sounds as if there's an issue here. What are your thoughts? Once again, it's the choice of the student, and I'm going to report in anything that the parents are asking for, or in the student's mind, they're telling me what to do. I work for the student, not for the parents. Even though the parent is the sponsor, my responsibility is to my client. So remember, that's the difference between the sponsor and the client. For many of you as coaches, and I hear this a lot when I am mentoring, but the parents are paying for coaching. I owe them information. I have to tell them. I have to do what they want. Every time that I have heard that and coached coaches around it, the end result is usually that the person who really wants the coaching, the parents, and not the student. If the student is following through and connected to the coaching process, that's great. If the parents are pushing for information and controlling the process, then you might not be able to be an effective coach. And that's a decision you have to make with your student as well as on your own. Is this a family, for example, that you want to continue to work with, or are they really stressing you out? There are times when we know that it can be very difficult to manage parents' expectations. So you have to consider, as a coach, this isn't about the money. Yes, we all want to make a living, earn a living, but if the parents are paying and they're pressuring the coach, then either learn to set those boundaries, which is what we're talking about today, or decide not to coach that student anymore if the parents are unwilling to step back. Okay, computer, let's see here. There we go. So, speaking of parents, how do you support parents as they wait in the wings? Now in this graphic here, they're sitting somewhat calmly. I don't see that very often. Usually they're biting their nails, or they're at home pacing around, or wondering what's happening and sort of peeking in to see how the coaching is going. If I'm on Skype, every so often I'll see a parent's head pop in the frame of the video. And it's hard. For those of you who are parents, and I know myself, when your child is working with someone else and you're wondering, I wonder how it's going. How are they doing? Is my child getting what my child needs? But then there's the other thing, especially with teenagers and young adults, is my child sharing what's important to share? And they don't know that. So when they don't know it, it really becomes a worrisome time. So it's important to help parents at the very beginning, to help them to understand that when they step back just a little bit and wait in the wings and just allow the coaching process to unfold, the chances of successful coaching are that much greater. When the parents try to get in and unintentionally sabotage the coaching, and I'll explain in a minute how that happens. When they do that, it doesn't help And parents always believe from their hearts that they are helping. So an example of that, parents who want to have their children planning to do their homework based around the family calendar. So if the family has weekend plans and the student has a term paper due and they're not speaking to each other, the parent is in some ways sabotaging the coaching, because now the plan that I worked on with the student to do the term paper and finish it up over the weekend, that's blown out of the water. There's no way that can be done. So it's important to explain to the parents, we want to support you. It's important for families to be together. How can we work together to make sure that when there are events or situations that come up, that your child knows what the schedule is, but also maybe it's a way of telling me as the coach, here are the things that are happening in advance. I've had families let me know when there are circumstances, whether it's illness, death in the family, family vacations, anything that might be coming up if their student has short-term memory problems, or the parent forgot to put it on the calendar because of their own memory issues. So it's really helpful to be in communication, because they want their students to succeed. But how do you succeed when you have to go off on the weekend and you can't get your paper done? It means that we need to redo our coaching plan, but you need to know that in advance. The other part is when parents will use negative consequences or punishment. And the one that really gets in the way of coaching is when the parents take away electronics. So I've been in situations where students have been set up in their coaching plan to either email or text me on a regular basis. And then I don't hear from them. And a week goes by and I have a coaching call and the student comes in and tells me about the week. And my question is, well, hey, what happened? I am wondering why I didn't hear from you. Or I wouldn't put it that way as a coach. I'd say, I didn't get any emails this week, and that's unusual for you. What's different from before? Oh, well, my parents grounded me and they took away electronics. Ah, okay. That's something where as a coach, I will request of my client that they talk to their parents about the fact that there needs to be access to those electronics in order for us to keep up with the coaching. And sometimes there are better consequences that are more effective for students rather than pulling out away all their electronics if they're using them specifically for doing homework, for coaching, for other research that they might need to do. And there are ways to limit electronics, but not to pull them away completely. And often, again, even if it's in writing, the parents will forget that that's the deal that we made, and they have trouble with that. Helping parents generally to know that your goal, that our goal as coaches, is to help their child succeed. It's what we all want, is to see success, and it's going to take a while. To encourage them to be patient. Some parents do need to go talk to their own coach or to a therapist about how to manage their own anxiety around shifting, because it's a transition. When you have a student who's getting older and wants to be more independent and parents are having trouble letting go, it's really helpful to have someone to talk to. So that's another option for them. Generally, just important to know that confidentiality in coaching leads to trust and honesty from the client. Our students are not going to want to talk with us if they feel as though there's a chance that the information that they share will be shared with their parents. It's amazing the information that I hear from students that they haven't yet shared with their parents, but by sharing it first with a non-judgmental person, someone who's not going to react, get upset in any way, and just listens and takes it in and asks, so how do you want to handle that? What would be the best thing for you? You mentioned your parents. What could you say about this situation the next time you sit down with them? And how can I help you to do that? So we might do role playing. We might talk about how to present something in a way that is more effective and less negative, for example. Oftentimes students will share something in a way, well, you know, I know you're going to get mad at me, but I did this and I did that, and you know, I already did it, so what's the big deal? Go ahead and punish me. Well, that's not the best way to have a conversation. So it's an opportunity, a great opportunity, to build self-advocacy skills and self-determination in students by helping them to craft language that allows them to have a conversation with their parents without any sort of an entry of anger or frustration. As you know, we feed off of other people's emotions. And if one person starts out in a negative tone, it tends to lead everything. So helping them to understand that, having them be in the role of their parents and role playing the student yourself. If you're a parent, think about how you're approaching your students hopefully in an open-ended way so that it's more effective, and they're going to listen to you when you're talking in a calm tone of voice rather than being ramped up, stressed out, or angry. So the next piece that I want to share with you is some of the dialogue that you can use to approach this issue of managing the boundaries with prospective and new clients and their parents. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, one of the ways to do that is to make sure at the very beginning of this relationship, in those initial conversations, that you explain what coaching is and what it's not. Coaching is a partnership between two people or a group if the coaching is being done in a group. If you were doing family coaching, you'd have a different set of rules and the boundaries would be different. But this is individual coaching. And I find that it is so valuable to bring that up in order to help students understand that they are going to be working with a trusted partner, that this is not therapy. I am not a teacher. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a disciplinarian, and I'm not taking the place of the parents. That each person in their life, each adult has a role. And the role of the coach is to partner with the student to help that student reach his or her goals in an effective way that works for them. So we know for students with ADHD and executive functioning issues that we have to help them chunk it down, identify what's working for them, what's not working for them. And in going through all of that up front and helping the students to understand what you will and will not offer them. For example, I'm always very clear that I'm not a homework coach. I used to get lots of calls and messages from parents who say, hi, you're one of those tutor coach people. Can you call me and work with my son because he's not getting his homework done? And what they want, some of them, is 4 days a week they wanted me to come to their house. Can you sit with him and make sure he does his homework? My answer is no. That's not what I provide. I am not a tutor. Nothing against tutors, but that's not what I do. So we have to clarify what the coaching is, even before we set the boundaries, because the boundaries around coaching are different than the boundaries around tutoring. If you're working on content and a student is having trouble, typically there's a conversation that extends from the student to the parent to the teachers. Everybody's involved in helping that student to learn more effectively. As a coach, my role is to help the student identify when he or she needs a tutor, how to approach the parents or the teacher for extra help, how to engage in a relationship with a tutor where they're asking for the help that they need. Oftentimes, students will complain about the fact that the tutor is not working with them according to their best learning modality. So if a student is really auditory, even though we all have a little bit of visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, if a student isn't really visual, let's say, is a little lower on that, and there's a lot of information that the tutor is writing down rather than talking it through, some of our students need to process it verbally. They need to hear it, they need to process it and talk through it. So that's important to help them in coaching on how to work with that tutor. So when you explain all of that, it can really help with the boundary issue, because parents will feel better about knowing that part of the role of the coach is to help the students to identify the issues and advocate for themselves, and to come up with strategies with support of the coach. And the coach is not going to tell their child what to do. I'm not going to tell my students what to do. I'm going to ask questions to help them figure out what it is and to become more self-aware. So if a student says to me, I drank too much this weekend, I went to a party on campus and I had too much to drink and I had a really bad hangover and I didn't go to class on Monday. Okay, thank you for sharing that. How are you going to handle this in the future? And the one issue is, what are you going to do about it today with the hangover? But the other is, how do you want to handle this situation? Because if I'm hearing you correctly, you got really drunk, you didn't get to do your work, and the consequence was your work didn't get turned in, so your grade went down. Going back to their goals, what is the goal? Is the goal to get the work done? Is the goal to not drink or party as much? Sometimes it's both, but we want to sort of chop that down into small pieces. And it's not my place to call the parent and say, hey, your kid was drinking on campus last night. It's for the student to advocate and the student to either reach out to their parents, or if they have a recurring problem, then that's something where I'm going to refer them out to a counselor on campus for a college student. If they're having problems with managing alcohol or any substance and they're trying to manage at school, it's a problem for lots and lots of students. But that's not going to push me into the place of breaking that confidentiality and the boundaries unless the student either refuses to do it or the problem continues. So a continuing problem, a refusal to address a problem or acknowledge a problem, typically the ones who come and tell you what's going on are acknowledging the problem and they're looking for solutions. So it's great to have that trusting relationship. Because when you back off from that, especially when they're over 18, they're thinking, I'm an adult, you can't tell my parents. It's a question of, well, what is it that's happening here? What's really going on? So you want to have these conversations with your new clients up front. Here's where my boundaries are. Here's where the limits are. I care about my clients. I want to make sure you're okay. If I have to make a phone call to your family or to a therapist because I'm concerned about you, genuinely concerned, that's my choice. And I get to do that. Are you willing to work with me as your coach, knowing that I'm going to keep things confidential unless you really need some additional help? Typically, everyone says yes, because they know that, hey, maybe something will happen and I do need help and my coach is there to help me. So I'm going to stop for questions in a moment, but I just want to share with you a couple of resources. One where I pulled the ethics from was the ICF Code of Ethics. And there's a book by Pat Williams and I think it's Shirley or Sheila Anderson, Law and Ethics in Coaching. It's a big book. You might want to see if you can get it at a library if you're interested in it. But just even looking online for different things and on the ICF website for information on ethics and coaching can really be helpful, because you want to make sure that you're doing everything you need to do to be the best coach possible and not be in a position where you are overstepping the boundaries. If you do, If you do want to reach out to me, you can email me directly at thejodi@jstcoaching.com or call my office. Email is always the best way to reach me. I'm going to open up for questions because this is a hot topic. So I'm going to open the chat box here, and I'm going to see if I can unmute everybody, because if I do that, then you can ask questions. And if not, let me see. Okay. That's not helping. All right, guys. So Q&A, we've got one right here. Okay. So is there, Jenna, I see that you started to ask a question. I've got the hello. What else do you have on there? And I'm going to just answer them live if you want to type them in, since I don't have the easy answer to how to get the microphones to work on your end. Please type into the Q&A box if you have a question for me. And I'll give everybody a couple minutes. And I do have a question that someone emailed to me. And I'll see if I can pull that up as well. Okay. Any other questions? Don't tell me nobody has questions today. Okay. I'm going to give you all a minute. So one of the things that while we're waiting for you to either formulate your questions or decide that you don't have any, is that what I've noticed is that sometimes coaching starts out and everything's great. And after a couple of months, I'll get a call or an email from a parent who's really angry because they misunderstood what the coaching was all about. So just be aware that that can happen, and it's okay. It's just about going back and saying, you know, it's been a while. I appreciate you being in touch with me, and I'll definitely be able to clarify things for you. Doesn't mean you're going to spill the beans on everything, but you can clarify. And I had one mom call me because she misunderstood how much I was charging, and she thought that my monthly charge was an hourly charge. And she was a lawyer, and she said, you're charging me almost as much, you know, as I make as a lawyer. And it's like, oh, no, it's not by the hour, it's by the month. And then, you know, she said, oh, you are doing a good job, because she was very angry with me. But I just didn't let that anger get in the way, and I clarified it. I had another parent who was very involved with the student. And in the initial session, they were talking about how the two of them worked together, and my misunderstanding was that they were going to continue to do that piece. And about 2 or 3 weeks, it was actually about a month after coaching started, the mom called and said, I'm wondering why you're not doing this piece. I need to get out of the middle. And I was like, oh, I completely misunderstood that, because your son was saying that he worked with you, but what you're telling me is the goal is not to have that happen. So we changed the plan. Okay, we do have some questions here from Jenna. I am meeting up with a mom, and she wants to learn how to coach her daughter. I am going to coach the mom to have the daughter there. Is this okay? It depends on the age of the daughter. If it's a child under the age of 12, it can be very valuable to have the mom do some coaching with the child. Part of it is to make sure that they both understand exactly what the process is. For teenagers and young adults, if you're coaching the mom and she wants to learn how to coach her daughter, my first thought is it's not a great idea to have a parent coach the daughter's an adult. Thank you, Jenna. I just scrolled down. Wow. That's not something I recommend. I would say if you're going to have a meeting, the first meeting with the two of them, to talk about it and to ask the question of, what would it be like to have the daughter coached by you directly? Because at that age, having a mother and an adult child trying to work together usually is not very successful unless they both want it. So it's clarifying who wants what. If the daughter's going to be the client in the situation, is it a good idea for the mom to be coaching, or is it better to get, if someone's going to be coached anyway, it can be a much better idea to remove the mom from the coaching process. And Michelle, how do you repair a rocky relationship with either a parent or a client due to misunderstanding about the coaching process? That's a great question, and it can be tough. My recommendation is to go in to it very clearly with saying, I understand that there's a misunderstanding here, and I would like to ask that we have a conversation to clarify and to clear up the misunderstanding. I mean, just put it out there and say, hey, sometimes people misunderstand one another. It's not about them or you, it's just general. Avoid saying you are sorry, because that means you're automatically taking responsibility for everything. To just say, it's unfortunate that this misunderstanding happened. What can I do to help us repair the situation? And find out what might clarify it, repair it, etc. Sometimes it will work, and other times, depending on the situation, if they're really uncomfortable, or if you're uncomfortable, you need to decide, do you want to continue to work with them or refer them to another coach? Okay, here's another person who's said the client is 21 years old at college, spent a year in residential treatment for depression and anxiety. The coach has questions if the client might not be emotionally ready for school, or does the mom need their own coach? So combination of two questions, if I understand that correctly. It's possible that that client might not be emotionally ready for school or for coaching, depending on the success of the residential treatment program. Some people are ready if it was a successful program. And so it's worthwhile to have an initial consultation and conversation with that student. And if the issue is about how do you manage that whole emotional connection between parents of a 21-year-old who's wanting or needing to be in college, number of reasons, a desire to be there, and also wondering, is my child ready? So in that case, having a coach for the parent can be great, because it can help the parent understand the boundaries and to understand that this is emotional. And yet at the same time, unless there's some additional imminent danger, letting go a bit can be really valuable for the mom. And to have some coaching around how can you manage your own issues, not from a therapeutic standpoint, but as far as even occupying one's time, looking at the situation with the daughter from a different perspective. So there can be real value in having the mom coached and to look toward the student as well as the people from the residential treatment program or the college to find out, is this student ready? Because sometimes as parents, we're not the best ones to look at a situation and say, yeah, my student's ready to go or not ready to go. So I would recommend the combination of the two. And thank you, Donna, for saying thank you for the webinar. If you have questions later, I know you said you have no questions now, but sometimes they pop up later. Does anyone else have questions? Let me just go back and see. Ah, yes. Okie dokie. All right, Deb, Jodi, every quarter I draft a progress update with the student and then share it with parents and students. It includes progress and work in progress. Then I invite the parents and students to add to it with items they may see as progress or work in progress, and we use these comments as we move forward. Is that okay? The student knows exactly what the document is before I send it. I think it's a great idea to do progress updates. Often I do those verbally, and we talk about it and jot notes down as we're talking. Typically, the invitation to the parents, if the student is old enough, it would be valuable to have the student present it to the parents rather than you presenting it. It changes the dynamic as to who's in charge and whose agenda it is. But if the students agree, there's nothing wrong with it. I just like to empower the student by saying, hey, look at the progress you made in the areas you're working on. When would you like to share this with your parents, or are you willing to share this with your parents in the next week and bring it back? So that's another option, but the basic idea is absolutely fine. And, oh, so Jenna, now you're meeting with the mom without the daughter. Did that just change? I shouldn't be asking that, but I'm just curious. So good. To have that meeting without the daughter was probably a good way to start to find out who really needs coaching and whose agenda is it. Yes, Michelle, is it okay to pull out the contract again to review and review? Absolutely. I've had to do that a few times because truly we have short memories. Or maybe I just have a short memory as I get older, but we do tend to forget what we signed. Or what the rules are. So it's perfectly fine to just say nicely, you know, I'd like to have us go over the contract again to make sure that we all understand what the plan is here. And I've had to do that a few times with people because they misunderstand, whether it's what are we doing in coaching, what the boundaries are, the confidentiality, the price, a whole bunch of stuff. And remember, in the ADHD coaching community and in the world, oftentimes, because we do know that ADHD is typically genetic, that parents forget too, or they've lost the copy of the contract. They might have their own organizational executive functioning issues. So it's absolutely okay. And often I find that parents do appreciate it when we say, hey, you know, would you like another copy of that? Or could we go over that again just to make sure? And it might be something that you do every quarter just as a review. I do with students, I'll go over their personal coaching agreements, anything else that we've agreed to. I'll check in every month and just say, how's it going for you? But every quarter, we definitely talk about changes and how we might want to make some changes. Dale, a testing period before drop ad to see if a student can handle college demands. It's not a bad idea, but I wonder how you do it. And I'm asking that honestly, Dale. I think it's a great question. As far as testing things out before drop ad, because it's such a chaotic time. So there's really that 2-week period before, I think it's about 2 weeks, and it varies by school, to see if a student can handle college. It can work, but it's also a very short period of time. Unfortunately, what I find is usually when students will, excuse the expression, crash and burn and find that they're not able to handle it, it's about 30 days in. I have one right now who's been at school just a month, and she's now home sick, and she's not on track with her work, and I got a text saying I can't make my coaching session, and so on. So the first few weeks before drop ad were really great. There's that initial energy, that adrenaline, the excitement, and the desire to make it work that can shift when all the social activities, which typically don't start in those first 2 weeks, when social activities kick in, those can really get in the way after that. But it's not a bad idea. And you were saying before overwhelm becomes unbearable. if that overwhelm is there within that short period of time, absolutely, it's a signal. And sometimes we do get those signals early on, which is why starting coaching before school starts can be really helpful, to find out how do we transition the student into the college year and into the semester, figuring out the choices, the school, how to navigate everything. That can be really valuable for sure. Okay, great. I'll take one more question. If the student feels comfortable talking about their feelings in another language that I can speak as well, is that okay? Absolutely. My understanding from people whose native languages are not English, because I can't compare myself, that's the only language I speak well at all, is that it's often the only way for a person to express their true feelings is in their native tongue. So if that is possible, absolutely. There's no reason why you can't kind of flip back and forth. And I know that the coaches that I work with in different countries, including yourself, that's part of the beauty of being able to speak that second language, or having English be your second language and have your native tongue be one that they understand. So yes, I encourage you to just work with students in whatever way works for them, and not to force it to be in one language or one way or another if you can do that. And that's where sometimes I'll ask people, you know, who do you want a bilingual coach? What's important to you? What will be the most beneficial, satisfying, etc. Great. Now I do have one question that was emailed in that I want to see if I can grab here. And the question is that the dad hired the coach, paid the coach, he supports the coaching, and when the daughter is with the dad, the divorced parent, the dad, everything's fine. The mother is just the opposite. She allows the student to miss school, makes social appointments in the evening so nothing else gets done, and she doesn't allow the parent, she doesn't allow her student, the mom doesn't allow the student to stick with the coaching plan. So basically, mom is sabotaging the coaching, and the dad is saying, please, please, please coach my daughter. When you're coaching a person half-time one way and half-time going against what the student is getting, so basically, whether it's every other week or half the week, the student is getting pressured. That issue needs to be resolved in order for coaching to be successful, because otherwise there's going to be you have a student who's going to be successful sometimes and then having a downfall, and then, okay, I'm doing well, now I'm not doing well. The confusion between the parents, that's a therapy issue, and to get in the middle of it as a coach can be really sticky, and it can be detrimental to the coach as well as to the student, because in this case the note is that the mom gets really nasty, and it's not that anger is not appropriate. A coach does not need to put up with, none of us should put up with anything that is that negative and nasty toward us. And if you ever, that's why having a mentor coach, a buddy coach, somebody to run things by sometimes can be extremely helpful, because you can get some stuff, I'll tell you. I mean, I've been doing this 20 years, so I have stories and stories and stories, and they're not all great, because sometimes people get angry. So I really, in that situation, if there's a tug of war between the parents, that needs to be resolved, unless there's a way to shift the mom to be in that situation, to be able to agree that certain things will take place for the coaching. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate all the great questions, and for being here while I figure out this situation with the brand new software. So we will get that recording and the link to you. Have a great afternoon, and thanks again.